Pleasant good morning to all. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 to 2 reads, I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Let us pray. Lord, our God of righteousness and truth, we invite your presence in this honorable house here today as it convenes. We pray for the members of Parliament in all their positions of responsibility. We pray, Lord, that they will seek the guidance of your Holy Spirit to seek to improve the conditions of all mankind on this island. May they never lead this nation wrongly through love or power of desire, but to please others. As we approach the closing of another year, we are grateful for your goodness and faithfulness to us. Lord, we know that you are in our midst at this time, and there is nothing that is happening that surprises you. You see the big picture, and you know everything that is at work today. Father, we ask that you would guide this country, guide Anguilla. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Brooks. Good morning. Members, you may be seated.
Confirmation of minutes of proceedings of the third meeting of the fourth session of the 12th Anguilla House of Assembly.
Are there any amendments to the minutes, please? If there are no amendments, can someone move that the minutes be accepted as circulated, please?
Madam Speaker, I move that the minutes are accepted as circulated.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that the minutes of proceedings of the third meeting of the fourth session of the 12th Anguilla House of Assembly be accepted as circulated. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those against, say no. The ayes have it. Minutes of proceedings of the third meeting of the fourth session of the 12th Anguilla House of Assembly are accepted as circulated.
Oath of allegiance to new members, none. Announcements by direction of the Speaker.
Thank you. I make apologies for absence with reason on behalf of the Single Island Wide Electoral District member, Mrs. Quincy Gums Marie, Single Island Wide Electoral District member, Mr. Kyle Hodge, and the member for Sandy Hill. Thank you.
Questions? None. Government statements on recent developments? None. Papers. Contributions Amendment Regulations 2023.
The member for Island Harbor is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning to you, Madam Speaker. Good morning to the members of the House, the staff, and those in the gallery. Madam Speaker, I rise to table the Contributions Amendments Regulations 2023. Regulations are made by the minister under sections 18, 19, 20, 22, and 45 of the Social Security Act, revised statutes of Anguilla, chapter S45. And, Madam Speaker, do you want me to read this through and then explain? Thank you very much. The interpretation, Clause 1, in these regulations, principal regulations means the contribution regulations, revised regulations of Anguilla, S45-2, amendment of Section 3, Clause 2. Section 3 of the principal regulations is amended by inserting the following new subsections immediately after subsection 1 to 1A, notwithstanding subsection 1, for the period beginning 1st of January 2024 to the 31st of December 2026, the contribution rates referred to in subsection 1A and 1B shall be in accordance with the table below. And the table is headed contribution rate, the date, employee, section 3, subsection 1, subsection A. Next heading, employer section 3, 1B. The date, January 1st, 2024, for the employees, 5.25%, employer 5.25%, January 1st, 2025, employee 5.50%, employer 5.50%, January 1st, 2026, employee 5.75%, employer 5.75%. In section 1B, notwithstanding section 1A, where payment of wages is made to or for the benefit of an employee on or after the 1st of January 2027, they shall be payable a contribution comprising 1, a contribution by the employee at the rate of 6%, and 2, a contribution by his employer at the rate of 6% of the amount of such wages. Citation and commencement. These regulations shall be cited as the Contributions Amendment Regulations 2023 and shall come into force on the 1st of January 2024, made by the Minister on the 8th day of December 2023, Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster, Minister for Social Security. There needs to be a second. Yes. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to give a brief explanation of this Contribution Amendments Regulations 2023. Speaker, it was laid before this House a report of the actuary. It was performed and conducted as of December 31st, 2020 by Mr. Derek Osborne of LifeWorks. And Madam Speaker, in the executive summary of that report, which has been laid before the House, is available for public consumption, was taken to public consultation by the Social Security of Anguilla. In the ultimate paragraph of the executive summary, which would be page 5 of 80, if major reforms are not made soon, the Social Security Fund could enter a crisis state in the next 10 years where draconian measures will be required. Madam Speaker, these contributions amendment regulations ought to put a stopgap to that crisis occurring. In that same report, the actuary stated that by 2037, that the Social Security Fund would become defunct if nothing is done. And there were many recommendations made, Madam Speaker. These recommendations included that should reduce administrative costs. The board is working on that. Recommendations were that a temporary hold be placed on hiring new staff and restructuring staff to carry out roles. That a new approach for contributions and benefits for self-employed persons, and that is where they would try to be an engagement of self-employed persons to make Social Security contributions, and that is already underway in terms of public awareness. During the last Social Security week, which was culminated on the 3rd of November, which is in line when the act was enacted in November the 3rd of 1980. And the last Social Security week, there was the public discussion towards self-employed persons being involved in Social Security. And to create some new policies. Madam Speaker, one of those was to increase the contribution rate. It was determined that the contribution rate should be raised to 12%, which is 6% for employees and 6% for employers. And we took the policy decision that that should be introduced in a phased fashion, and that is at 0.25% per year for 4 years, to get from the current 5% to 6% for employees and the current 5% to 6% for employers. Now, Speaker, it was also suggested that we should raise the age of benefits, the pensionable age, to higher than it is right now, from 65, 67 or beyond, and the choice was made by this administration not to raise that. Certainly, we want to try other options before we go to that. And then there was an issue that was raised during the public consultations. Why not increase the ceiling? Because the ceiling right now is set at $7,000 per month. And so this was raised, and this was put to the actuary, and the actuary's response in regards to increasing the contribution ceiling from $7,000, that increasing the ceiling in significant steps, as has occurred in the past, is not a measure that enhances sustainability. These are the words of the actuary, Madam Speaker. So it says that, in fact, it hurts efforts to improve long-term finances. While more contributions are received in the early years, the increase in the value of benefits to those higher paid persons who qualify in the years after is excessive. If such an increase were to occur, there would need to be an adjustment factor applied to average insurable wages when pensions are being calculated to ensure that the increased value of benefits is consistent with the increased contributions collected. The actuary went on to state that a better approach to ensuring that Social Security maintains its relevance to higher paid workers is to increase the ceiling every year or even every 2 years by the actual increase in wages. This occurs in the British Virgin Islands, Bahamas, and Barbados, and perhaps soon in Grenada. He concluded, the ceiling is now at an adequate level where only around 10% to 12% earn more than the $7,000 per month, most of whom are probably public sector employees who have other pensions. So, Madam Speaker, I know this has been raised during public consultation and also by members on the other side of the aisle as to why not increase the ceiling from $7,000 up based on salary. The actuary did state why that is not sustainable, because you'd have to pay higher benefits when that person is pensionable, and it does not a guarantee that raising the benefit, the contribution now would actually correlate with the higher benefits that would have to be paid. So, Madam Speaker, this is a start. Contributions Amendment Regulations 2023 for Social Security to raise the contribution rate from 5% to 5.25% starting in January of 2024 to 5.5% or 5.5% by January of 2025 to 5.75% January of 2026 and 6% January of 2027. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member for Island Harbor. And just to add that the Contributions Amendment Regulations 2023 is subject to a negative resolution. You may continue.
Reports from committees, none. Petitions, none. Government notices, none. Private members' notices, none. Motions. Motion 2, 2023, 4, 12 HOA, consideration of report of the Select Committee on Gun Crime and Violence.
Under Section 54 of the Anguilla Constitution Order 1982, I have summoned Mr. Rudolph Proctor, the former Commissioner of Police of the Royal Anguilla Police Force, and Mrs. Hyacinth Bradley, Community Services Planner, to participate in the debate this morning on the committee's report as expert advisors to the Select Committee. And I believe that they have a very good understanding of the subject at hand, and I believe that their participation in this debate will be of benefit to the Assembly and to the public at large. So I now invite you to join the members of the Assembly. I will read, for the sake of the public, the section of the Constitution that you are summoned under. And it reads, "The Speaker or other person presiding may, when in his opinion the business before the Assembly makes it desirable, summon any person to a meeting of the Assembly, notwithstanding that that person is not a member of the Assembly." 54.2, any person so summoned shall be entitled to take part as if he was a member in the proceedings of the Assembly relating to the matter in respect of which he was summoned, except that he may not vote. So welcome, Mrs. Bradley and Mr. Proctor. The member for Road North is recognized.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the motion, consideration of final report of Select Committee established to consider gun crime, gang violence, and its associated issues.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I'll just, if you permit, with your permission, I'll just read the resolution, and if you allow me just to point out some key recommendations that was made by the committee. So I'll read again. Be it resolved that this House of Assembly has considered the final report of the Select Committee established to consider gun crime, gang violence, and its associated issues in Anguilla. Madam Speaker, just before reading, I would just like to thank all who came forward to help give their statements, their witnesses, and everything with this committee. We first thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing us to put this select committee together. I also thank the hard-working staff of the House of Assembly for giving tirelessly, especially Deputy to the Clerk, Ms. Venetia Proctor, who kept us on our toes and made sure we attended all meetings, made sure all meetings were scheduled, and was very, very, very inspirational in getting us all the information we needed. Also thank all members of this House who participated. I will go through the names in a little bit later. And I want to give special thanks to our two expert witnesses. Sometimes the word expert is thrown around just loosely, but I can assure you we had two expert advisors who definitely they were a big addition to the committee, and I feel a lot of the work that we got completed would not have been done without these two advisors. Madam Speaker, like I said, if you'll just permit me, I'll just read the recommendations quickly. Through our witnesses and on camera and off camera, we were able to come up with 20 recommendations, and I'll go through them now. Number 1, Anguilla law enforcement agencies should establish MOU agreements with regional law enforcement agencies to combat illegal contraband. Number 2, law enforcers should update the committee on the progress of the local marine base and equipped sea vessel by the end of the first quarter in 2024. 3, law enforcement agencies should engage in regular rotation of staff in strategic positions at the local ports to tackle any onset of corruption. 4, Ministry of Infrastructure, Communication, Utilities, Housing and Tourism, in collaboration with Anguilla Air and Seaport Authority, should conduct a review on security measures at all ports by the end of March 2024. 5, law enforcers should implement mechanisms which track, monitor, and seek to improve response time for both police and emergency personnel. 6, the Department of Sports should develop a national policy on various sporting activities with an aim to promote intercommunity collaboration among young persons and adults. 7, school officials should exercise strict adherence to the provisions related to penalties in the Education Act to ensure consistency and equal application. School officials should present a report to the Gun, Crime and Violence Committee showing strict adherence 6 months after notice is received. 8, government in collaboration with the Ministry of Education should commence a full assessment of the security measures provided at a comprehensive school and implement the appropriate mechanisms to full inadequacies. An assessment should be presented to the relevant stakeholders and this committee 6 months post-publication of this report. 9, the Ministry of Social Development should review the scope and mandate of the community centers to provide more applicable services for 2024 and beyond. The ministry should present a work plan to the Gun, Crime and Violence Committee by February 2024. 10, police community officers should further development and support of community watch initiatives, in particular those which build relationships with police, parents, and young people. 11, increase police presence in communities throughout the island. 12, district offices should be established throughout Anguilla to provide community-based support to citizens. 13, the Ministry of Social Development, in collaboration with stakeholders, should establish a structured framework for providing mental health and psychosocial support to individuals within communities affected by gun violence. 14, probation department should implement follow-up programs with the attempt to further minimize recidivism among young persons. 15, The prison department should review its policy regarding individuals awaiting prison sentences to provide them with interventions that are catered to individual well-being. 16, the prison department, in collaboration with the probation department, should develop strategic programs to facilitate the reintegration of paroles into society. 17, government to provide financial and personal support to the community services planner to facilitate the development and implementation of more comprehensive programs catering to the needs of youth and families across Anguilla. 18, in light of increased violence, all public buildings and institutions should establish and implement emergency response plans. 19, law enforcers should engage in consultations with relevant stakeholders to strategically revise the criminal code and firearms legislations. 20, law enforcers should conduct a comprehensive investigation into the feasibility of implementing CCTV and present a report to relevant stakeholders, including the Gun Crime and Violence Committee, within 6 months post the publication of this report. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Motion 223-412 HOA has been moved and seconded. Members, the floor is now open for contributions to this motion. I invite you all to participate. Mrs. Hyacinth Bradley, one of the expert advisors to the Committee on Gun Crime and Violence, is now invited to speak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, Madam Speaker and esteemed members of the House. In our relentless pursuit of a safer Anguilla, the urgency of addressing youth gun and gang-related violence cannot be overstated. This is not merely a concern, Madam Speaker, for just some. It is a collective issue demanding a united response. A response, Madam Speaker, where we tackle the root causes comprehensively with strategies encompassing prevention, intervention, rehabilitation. This report and the recommendations therein, shaped by intensive and extensive interviews and reviews, it reinforces that treating symptoms of violence alone is insufficient. And this has been a practice. We must prioritize, Madam Speaker, measures that enables us to shape a more sustained response to the eradication of gun and gang-related violence. Madam Speaker, this report, it is a symbol. It is a symbol of our commitment, and I must extend gratitude to the community members, to the youth, to survivors, to the reform adults, to our teachers, to law enforcement, etc., and all those we had to engage with in confidential settings to inform this report. I thank them for their invaluable contributions. Madam Speaker, being a part of this committee is a mission rather than just one individual. And I extend heartfelt appreciation to everyone for allowing me and Mr. Proctor to be part of the team and to contribute. Together, we identified shortcomings and limitations, and we renewed our commitment to addressing gun and gang violence. Madam Speaker, profound gratitude is also extended to you and this honorable House for elevating this issue to national priority, witnessing the commitment to transform words into tangible actions. This is heartening. This report is in itself a declaration which resonates beyond these walls, reaching every street, every school, every church, every family in Anguilla. As a committee, we examined the increasing gun crime and gang violence through situational analysis, desk reviews, and public inquiry that was launched on July 18th. It was a very inclusive process which involved public sessions, written evidence, and community outreach. And this inclusive approach employed to gather information must now be transitioned into the implementation of solutions. So, Madam Speaker, as this report and the recommendation is laid in this honorable house today, I'd like us all to not underestimate the power that each of us brings, the power that each of us holds to contribute to this change, to contribute to the change we desire. Our individual actions, no matter how small, have the potential to create ripples of change. Every conversation, every act of kindness, and every effort to uplift our youth can be a catalyst for transformation. So, Madam Speaker, addressing and accepting these recommendations within this report is not merely a choice, it is imperative for our well-being, our safety, and the prosperity of Anguilla. Madam Speaker, these recommendations, they're not arbitrary. They stem from candid conversation and a sincere desire for positive change. I know persons may say we've heard those issues before, but what is happening? And that is always a cry. We connected with mothers, fathers, those in authority. We spoke with survivors. We spoke with children and entire families. And we spoke with individuals who sought and who are seeking refuge in the streets, Madam Speaker, and potential gangs due to generational trauma and struggles. We heard from those mourning loss, those living in fear, Madam Speaker, and we heard from those who are feeling defeated. Madam Speaker, if we refer to the appendix in this report, we can examine the responses obtained and those particularly shared during our community outreach emphasized the socioeconomic factors where young people, particularly young people, indicated that they are brokes. They mentioned the high cost of living and the lack of opportunity to acquire trade. They mentioned that as a youth, as a young adult, they find solace, Madam Speaker, in joining gangs because we have no one to look up to, or they have no one to look up to. They do not feel loved, and their homes are not happy places. Gangs give them the sense of belonging. When we inquired about their choices of firearm, Madam Speaker, the responses were, we need protection. Guns also provide us with power, and we have a purpose. Fear, Madam Speaker, was a recurring theme. When mention of the ease, some mentioned of the ease of access to guns and drugs. Mention of how easy it could be to purchase and the approximate cost for power. Disturbingly, Madam Speaker, the report also highlights that gang initiation The gang initiation often commenced in the high school. Mention was made about the absence of positive outlets or areas for relaxation, to mingle without fear. They revealed a profound lack of trust in the systems designed to support and safeguard them. So, Madam Speaker, when we discuss the fight against crime and gang-related violence, it is about an entire community, or entire communities living in fear. It is about the lives lost. It is about families suffering. It is about a cry for help. It is about protection. It is about support. And because of that, we must ensure that these recommendations, when implemented, must be rigorously assessed for their effectiveness. And this is where the challenges of limited to no resources comes in. Our findings encapsulated challenges experienced by a number of agencies, and that of limited resources was echoed throughout. I need now, Madam Speaker, to speak in my role as a community services planner. I'm the sole officer with the mandate to lead research and implement peace-building initiatives from a community standpoint. I am acutely aware of those resource and personnel challenges, this constraint on technical resources, personnel resources, and nominal budget. For example, Madam Speaker, my little monies, or the little monies that are given to me, they're tucked in within the ministry under sundry, like any other business. And that speaks to the significance of, how significant is our cry to support community, to redirect lives. And this it's painful, Madam Speaker. This is my stark reality. This is our stark realities. Shouldering the responsibilities of addressing crime and criminal-related issues is a task undertaken by me and most, with dedication, Madam Speaker, but it is simply unsustainable without adequate support. Resources, both human and financial, serve as the essence of any effective initiative or initiatives. Without those resources, Madam Speaker, our efforts risk becoming a well-intentioned facade, that fades in the face of reality. So, Madam Speaker, we don't want to become laughingstocks again. We're in the Honorable House, and it's a priority. Accepting those recommendations while still grappling with significant resource limitations, it compromises the effectiveness and sustainability. Let me share briefly a case in point. One of the interventions I'm coordinating is that of the supporting families. And that involves working with families that have been flagged by multiple agencies for safeguarding issues in education and law enforcement. Might be a parent at HMP, may have grown up in the social services system. Now, when I start to engage with those persons, people start to trust, people start to make themselves even more vulnerable, and people start to expect, not necessarily that the community services planner can give, but there are resources, there's services, there's support that can help them in seeing a positive next step, in seeing purpose. And if every time we come, because of limited personnel, limited resources, and we start something, we dig a sow, and then we just have to put a plaster quick, because we cannot have to move to something else, it is not sustainable. We cause it more hurt, and it's going to be very difficult to have sustained intervention if we keep breaking people's trust and making promises that fall short. Because we've seen persons, Madam Speaker. Just tomorrow, we're going to be celebrating 15 parents who finished a 10 weeks course on the support under the Family First program. We spoke on conflict resolution. We spoke of building support, of better engagement with children, of communication. We spoke on how to build finances and budget and how to deal with little challenges, how to manage, how to express love, even if they may not have received that growing up, how to change or break that cycle. But we've got to move on to something else, Madam Speaker. At the end of 10 months, we should have resources and support and individuals to help. And then when they're ready, when they can float, we release. Impact, visibility, Madam Speaker, in preventative work and any intervention. Our present and consistency, that's crucial, they're crucial, especially when addressing cultural shifts, changing behaviors, and supporting individuals, as some of our recommendations require. So here, Madam Speaker, I'd like to make a special appeal to this Honorable House. As a committee member, and again, as a sole officer in my area with a significant mandate, I urge this Honorable House to recognize the urgency in allocating the essential resources needed to strengthen our fight, not my fight, is everybody's fight against gun and gang-related violence. To invest in preventative measures to enhance our intervention. And as we consider that need, Madam Speaker, I would also like to appeal to everyone, to every Anguillian, to every resident, young, old on this island. I want all us to think of the emotional toll on our young people. The crying out from those we call the bad children or the rotten eggs. Let's think about the tears of mothers and the guilt of fathers. There is fear, there is concern. We should all pledge to be the catalyst for change. We must impart a sense of collective responsibility. And Madam Speaker, before I close, I must emphasize a few things. And I know Mr. Proctor and I have spoken about that with the committee and in our conversations. You see, Madam Speaker, for effective change as a community, as an island, we must lift that veil of silence. Our island is plagued not just by the violence itself, but by the hushed whispers and the closed eyes that follow. Our culture of silence contributes to the continuation of crime. And Madam Speaker, if we venture into rolling out those recommendations, into enhancing the programs that we already have, with the same attitudes, we will continue to fail. Also, Madam Speaker, we are very reactive people. When something happens, we become fueled by adrenaline, man. We even play the blame game. We exert a surge of emotion, but it disappears so quickly. Our response is that of what we call the knee-jerk reaction. And we must, Madam Speaker, cultivate a proactive and responsive stance. And further, Madam Speaker, in our shared commitment to eradicating youth crime and gun violence, it is crucial to recognize that a balanced approach is imperative. We speak much about punitive measures. We'll throw them out of school, jail them. Them can't be mothers, take the children. But a singular focus on punishment falls short in addressing the root causes of gun and gang violence. So it is essential to take a delicate balance incorporating responses that emphasizes prevention, rehabilitation, and community empowerment. The recommendations presented in this report reflect this balance. And finally, Madam Speaker, we have conducted this study, engaged with persons, compiled a report, and now presenting recommendations to this Honorable House. But I must mention that I personally, Madam Speaker, for one, I refuse to be part of any talking board. I don't want to be part of any echo chamber where the ideas, we discuss, we feel good, we got a plan and everything fall through, where reports are printed, but they're left on shelves to pick up dust. If there is no concrete action, this exercise would be a betrayal. It would be a betrayal of the trust bestowed upon us by the very people we serve, Madam Speaker. People are not interested in proclamations. We've met, we've discussed, we saw. So I am appealing that we do not merely adopt recommendations. It is important that each of us reflect on what we can genuinely contribute, what actions we can honestly take, and we need to champion their implementation to create a safer Anguilla. And in conclusion, Madam Speaker, I pray that this moment, today, will be a turning point. And this time, Madam Speaker, our deeds will resonate louder than our words. Let us all remember that behind every crime statistics, Madam Speaker, is a human story, is a tale of pain and loss that vibrates through our communities. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for affording me the opportunity to speak today. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Mrs. Bradley. I can hear the passion in your voice pouring out. And there's been an appeal to members of this House. I trust you are listening. I now recognize Mr. Rudolph Proctor, former Commissioner of Police of the Royal Angola Police Force and one of the expert advisors to the Gun Crime and Violence Committee. Mr. Proctor?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, honorable members of this House of Assembly, if there is anyone that would like to talk with passion about crime and violence in this country, I'd probably be one of those who would stand in that line. Having spent 32 years in law enforcement, with over 20 of those years on the front lines of fighting serious and violent crime in this community, I have a good sense and a good feeling of the pain that our country has gone through over the many years to this point in relation to violence, especially gun crime. Firstly, Madam Speaker, I want to thank the members of this committee. Since I emitted office in 2015, I have withdrawn from public life in a large way. When I received the invitation to be part of this committee, I didn't hesitate in affirming my attendance and have done so through the entire process of this committee. I fully support and endorse all that my colleague, Mrs. Bradley, have said in her remarks. I have had the opportunity to work with Mrs. Bradley throughout the community on some issues as a police officer. And know that she is quite passionate and committed to the work that she has done and continues to do in the Anguillan society. These recommendations that are outlined in this report by this committee, like Mrs. Bradley, I would like to advise that they should not be taken lightly. They should be treated as a step in the process of helping us to eradicate, suppress gun crime and violence in our community. For many years, some of the things that are highlighted in some of these recommendations have been talked about in the offices, in the rooms, of very high places in this community, but there has been no movement. And as a public servant, which I am no longer a public servant, so I would have some feelings for Mrs. Bradley. When you are in a position to do something and you need the resources, the equipment, the personnel, monies to help you take it forward, and there is a reluctance to do so. But when these things manifest themselves into serious incidents that we are seeing emerging in our country today, we, the persons who are leading the charge on these incidents, are normally the ones who are blamed. So I would straight up say that whatever resources that public servants who are on the front lines of fighting crime and violence in this country needs, there should be a concerted effort on the part of those who makes the decisions, create the policies to ensure that these resources are given. There are many stories that we heard during our deliberations with witnesses, and there were some that touched me. There was one witness, when we were speaking about a colleague who had died as a result of gun violence, actually cried because he could relate to the pain. There are many families that I have seen during my time that gun violence and violence have torn apart. There are situations that they have been made worse as a result of violence. There was one witness, Madam Speaker, that appeared before us who cannot support his family anymore. It was hard to ask him questions, sit there and hear him explain how he cannot support his young daughter anymore because somebody on that night thought it was a good idea to go and shoot him to the point that he is paralyzed and is wheelchair bound. These things hurt. Even you who haven't been impacted directly. There has been a general silence throughout our community, not today, but for a very long time. All this is doing, Madam Speaker, honorable members of this House, and those who are listening to us, is embolden those who are prepared to perpetrate crime on the citizens of this country. And unless there are some bold steps taken to address this situation, we are going to find ourselves in this position for a very long time. So, Madam Speaker, I am of the opinion that it was a very timely for you and the members of this House to put together this select committee to look at gun violence in this society. For me, it was an experience that I've enjoyed. To see Anguilla's young and bright politicians working with us together to find and recommend solutions to this problem. This could only mean, honorable members, Madam Speaker, that we are on course to stop this scourge of gun violence in its tracks if we continue to work together in this format, similar formats, and to support the government agencies that are tasked to fight gun crime and violence. It is not an easy process in a society where nobody talks. When the law enforcement agencies come seeking information regarding crime and violence, all they are basically asking you is to assist. There are times when we would need you to be witnesses, and there are times when they would probably just need for information purposes, to develop intelligence. And that support is necessary. It's the same when in the ministry, there is a department that, a desk, that is headed by Mrs. Bradley, wants to go out in the community and meet with parents. It was heartwarming to hear her say that there are 15 parents who are going to go through some process or the other later. Because in our deliberations, there was one parent that spoke out loud and clear, as a matter two, about how this program that Mrs. Bradley is heading up in the Ministry of Social Development, how it's working for them. Parents who have children who could go any side of the fence at this stage could turn to crime and violence, or could be good children. And this program is working and helping. All I can say, honorable members, as far as that is concerned, hear Mrs. Bradley and her ministry and provide those resources and assistance that she would need for them. To the law enforcement agencies that are tasked to protect what we have, and a lot of this came up in our deliberations about the porous nature of Anguilla borders. Now, while we are not just today, but for many years have been accommodating to persons who come to our country to vacation here and enjoy themselves, we must be mindful that there is no substitute for Anguilla's security. So there must be some more work done in terms of policing our marine sector, of ensuring that the police department has the requisite facilities and resources, a maritime vessel that can adequately patrol the borders of this country. I've heard some statements recently on something that was put in place during the pandemic. And there have been some good work done. But through all that good work, I can tell you the poorest areas of our country were penetrated back and forth. And I can say this because I've seen it. We could never be able, unless we provide them those statistics, those resources to the police department. And it shocked me as a former police officer, one who spent some time at the Marine unit, that our police force no longer has a Marine unit. So in terms of our recommendations in here, I hope those that are listening, and the honorable members present, Madam Speaker, that we find a way to address that situation. Because without having a marine base and a marine asset that the police force can respond, we are an open gate for all sorts of smuggling activity and illegal activity. Remember, we have offshore keys that we have accepted contraband on. Not only drugs, but weapons as well. This can happen again. And in a period of time when our youth have taken on the challenges of going into people's homes and committing these heinous crimes, going close to our schools and committing these violent gun crimes, what next, Madam Speaker? So we have to give them the necessary resources that they need to be able to curtail the situation. Madam Speaker, Honorable members, I have toiled with the position that a lot of this problem with our young people has to do with parenting. There is no substitute for spending quality time with your children. The 2 jobs and the 3 jobs thing didn't just happen today. It was echoed years ago. You got to spend that quality time. And for those parents who are having some difficulty understanding how to balance that with the economic situation, which for some that we've heard is very bad, you got to try and link up with this program that Mrs. Bradley runs out of the Ministry of Social Development. Get some tips in relation to that. But parents needs to be in the lives of their children. There's a lot of institutions in this country, Madam Speaker, that when some things occur, they are very loud on these issues, and after that, they fade into the wind. This effort by this committee that was sanctioned by this House of Assembly have made a serious effort in redirecting some of the concerns relating to these issues. And all we can beg, Madam Speaker, is for those who are listening to us and those of you who are present in this assembly, honorable members, that we take it serious. The discussions and deliberations by members of this Gun Crime and Violence Committee was exceptionally good. The communication and concern that we shared amongst each other while addressing these issues was exemplary. Even as we were deliberating, serious gun crimes and violence were occurring in this country. It tells me that there is a certain level of recklessness and dangerous behavior amongst our young people, that they have no regards for authority. And it just didn't happen today. It was coming along. And as we were going through this process, the police force trying their best to implement programs, the ministry through different groups, PAVE and Mrs. Bradley's desk, some interventions in the schools, still wasn't subsiding. But this effort, Madam Speaker, outlines 20 recommendations, as the chairman and Mrs. Bradley has highlighted. Some, as I say, been around for a long time. Let's look at CCTV. That is in one of our recommendations. I have sat many years ago in different meetings addressing this whole idea of CCTV. And as Mrs. Bradley said, we create reports, we put them on our desks and on shelves, and they get dust and it's gone. But when there's a reoccurrence of things that CCTV could have helped our law enforcement agencies, these discussions come again. Like Mrs. Bradley said, and I endorse, I would willingly support anything that is good for Anguilla, that would keep Anguilla and its citizens safe, but not to be part of no echo chamber, where we produce these reports and they just bounce off the walls and that's it. If you are going west and you commit a crime east, you have to pass the George Hill Junction, and if you're smart and you want to go into the North Hill Junction, so we could catch you there. The CCTV can see you there. And the same can be done, even though it's a little trickier going east. Some years ago, Madam Speaker, an Anguillan vendor went abroad and developed his skills as far as CCTV come. Put a test camera on the building from Lake looking straight to the roundabout at Webster Park Junction. Clean, crystal clear, beaming into the police station. The police force other stakeholders, we advocate for having that system installed. The very week that test ended, a murder occurred on that street. And where it occurred, that camera would have beamed that straight into the police station. So, Madam Speaker, I just highlight that to say that some serious consideration must be given to the CCTV at our ports, ports of entry, and at these key locations in our country. Madam Speaker, our country has some decent young people. Our country has some youngsters who have turned to crime, and Mrs. Bradley highlight some of the things that we picked up in our interviews and outreach. Some children feel they're not getting the love at home. We have to find something, Madam Speaker, and some program that will address the parents. I am one of those people who have heard the talk about the father figure in the house. I have seen some mothers who have been good fathers and mothers at the same time. I have also seen some children who have committed very serious crimes, who came from parents and good parents, as they would call it. What we have to provide for our community, Madam Speaker, is some help for those parents. We know the economic situation for some has been highlighted, but I would still say, to give your child that love, that time to hear what's the issues that he may be experiencing as a result of peer pressure, and addressing them at a very early stage could prevent that boy or girl, even though 99% of the incidents we have with violence and guns are male-driven. So we need to reinforce that aspect of it. We also heard about law enforcement and law enforcement officers, and there is something that even when I was a cop, a police officer, I heard this, Madam Speaker, about corruption within the services. It is not a good feeling when you walk in a department and you hear about corruption. It is even extremely worse when you don't know who are the persons that are involved in these corrupt practices. But there are methods for which we can address those. And in our deliberations, we have heard from Commissioner of Police, we've heard from the Controller of Customs, and we heard from the prison, we heard from the immigration. And they all are considering ways and means of addressing any instances of corruption. We as a committee strongly recommend to them that a rotation of staff at these key places be a consideration. Because in that way, you are not allowed to build up these relationships that can lead you down the road of corruption if you are not that strong. And throughout this region, there are similar issues in relation to those instances. Madam Speaker, members, I can go on and on, but I want to end by saying our children are not lost, not all of them. I have seen in my profession where somebody comes in for a very serious crime, and you have a talk with that young person, and honestly you sit there and you wonder how that person got involved in that type of level of violence. So it means that there are some things in our society that are lacking that we need to develop. And I am quite pleased to say that we have tried our best as a committee to cover a number of these areas in recommendations. If there was one disappointment, I would say it was the fact that a lot more persons who we had expected to participate in this exercise didn't do so. We hope that there would be a future exercise, maybe of this sort or something else, that they will have that opportunity to express themselves and share their concerns. Because gun crime and violence is serious. It is very serious. It impacts the police service. It impacts our tourism industry. It impacts our medical and health services, because there's a number of things that we have to seek from outside to help us, from pathology to ballistics to medical services. These are serious things that can bring us to our knees. And Madam Speaker, we all know what happened recently when the young school child was killed. It impacted the school. Students were frightened, teachers were concerned, parents were concerned about our children. So these issues need to be developed. More social programs. Our sporting activities need to be developed and to get back to that peak where it used to be. I stand here today in this House of Assembly with the Honorable Merritt Richardson for years, and he would tell you when volleyball was to the roof, when cricket was to the roof. Now today it's only football to the roof. We have to get those things so that the young men and women of this country can be involved and use up some of that time that they're going to the streets. Madam Speaker, like Mrs. Bradley, I have a special place in my heart for the work that law enforcement officers do. And it's with a large degree of passion, having seen people that once breathed the same breath of life like me, lie motionless as a result of the acts of gun violence. It tears you apart. And though you are not a victim, whether personally or by having a family member, when you go home to sleep, it troubles you. I would beg, Madam Speaker, to once again thank you and the honorable members of this House who put together this committee, for giving me that opportunity to share with members and this community and the Anguillan public, by extension, my experiences and knowledge as it relates to gun crime. And I will pray to God that this scourge of violence that have engulfed our children and our communities cease. Thank you, Madam Speaker, honorable members.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph Proctor, former Commissioner of Police of the Royal Anguilla Police Force and one of the expert advisors to the Committee on Gun Crime and Violence. We also want to thank you for your service to our island. I know you have done a wonderful job in that area and still continue to do on a personal basis. So indeed, we thank you. Now, I see two members, so I'm going to ask you to raise the hands again. Okay, one. They say ladies are first, but okay, certainly. The Single Island White Electoral District member, Mr. Joseph Vanterpool, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Good morning to you, Madam Speaker, to my fellow members, to our expert advisors, those present in the gallery, as well as those listening via Facebook or radio. Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to speak towards the work of this committee and thus the report that's before the Honorable House today. I'd like to start off by saying a special thank you to our expert advisors, former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Proctor, as well as our Community Services Officer, Ms. Bradley. Ms. Bradley. Madam Speaker, they did some seriously hard work and they were giving of their time without arguing or without anything. Their dedication and commitment, which was evidently a public service, was truly not only appreciated but invaluable. They brought with them certain perspectives, experience, and insight that we as normal committee members would not have had. And I believe that this is truly a good example of the purpose of expert advisors and their usefulness to parliamentary committees. Secondly, Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the parliamentary staff and our clerk of committees who would have been invaluable in completing this work. They were the whips who stayed behind us and made sure that we stayed motivated and on task. And without them, we would not be here today at this stage presenting this report. And finally, Madam Speaker, I would like to say a big thank you to everyone who would have come out and participated in the inquiry process, whether in a public or a private capacity. While I know, Madam Speaker, that we should avoid special recognition, I do want on this occasion to specially recognize those persons who came out and shared their personal stories and experiences. While I won't refer to names, we heard stories of those persons who had their lives changed forever due to being victims of, shot, and in some instances paralyzed due to gun crime and violence. And they also shared with us not only how it affected them personally, but how those consequences would have spilled over towards their family and those around them. We would have heard the personal stories of persons who were once involved in gun crime and violence, who have since been reformed and have now become advocates for a better way of life for our youth. We also heard the personal stories, Madam Speaker, of those who, despite trying their best as parents, are struggling to cope with the behaviors and actions of their children. And while on this note, Madam Speaker, I would like to further reinforce the plea that was made by our community services planner, because not only did we hear the experiences, we also heard the testaments of parents who would have been able to go through these programs and the benefits from which they would have derived, the improved relationships with their children, and the feeling of support in terms of giving guidance in a place where they may not have had the best examples coming up. I would like to thank you all for your openness, your honesty, and the vulnerability displayed in helping paint a true and candid picture for us, the committee, as well as the community at large, of the severe issue which plagues us. There were several moments where it was hard not to be reduced to tears. What is important, Madam Speaker, is that despite this, the reoccurring sentiment and theme that was portrayed was one of hope, as no one was of the view that Anguilla was lost or too far gone. Mrs. Bradley, in her presentation, would have made the point that we each need to ask ourselves what it is that we can do on the individual level to put Anguilla back on the right path. Madam Speaker, from my perspective, I believe that we need all hands on deck, and we need to live our lives demonstrating the change that we wish to see take place in our community. We need to live lives which demonstrate love, exemplify discipline, and are founded on respect. We need to consciously and purposely set the right examples which we wish for our youth and the future generations to follow. Madam Speaker, before getting directly into the contents of the report, I was listening to an interview on YouTube yesterday. It was with a past prominent rapper in the hip-hop field, Mr. Busta Rhymes, and it was focused on his disappearance from the hip-hop scene over the past 10 years and why it had to do with his mental state at the time. During this interview, Madam Speaker, he would have spoken to the differences between the hip-hop and street culture of the United States today versus that of a few decades ago. One of the things that he would have highlighted, Madam Speaker, is that the issue in the streets today is that integrity and respect are no longer valued, and we have lost the spirit where it took a community to raise a child. He noted that even when growing up in the streets of Baltimore, you are still required to speak with respect and manners, especially when addressing your elders. He noted that any one of the elders in your community had the power to reprimand or beat you if you stepped out of line, with another crop of licks waiting for you when you get home for misrepresenting your parents and your family. He noted that how respect no longer matters, and that if someone else steps in to correct a child nowadays, that's more likely to end up in a fight between the parents rather than focusing on the issue at hand. Madam Speaker, one of the issues that repeatedly came up during this inquiry process is that part of the issue is that we are losing our Anguillan and what it means to be Anguillan to that of foreign cultures and foreign media. But this drew a very striking parallel for me, Madam Speaker, because if I was not aware that he was speaking about the streets of Baltimore and the streets of the United States, I would very well have thought that he was highlighting the issues that we face in Anguilla today, where no longer it is the case where a community comes together to look out for the best interests of the children. So, Madam Speaker, it begs me to ask the questions. Have we also adopted the social breakdown through our media and the adoption of these foreign cultures? How do we blame these external forces for losing our Anguillan spirit of village or community when coming together to raise children? What can we do to reverse this process and regain what was once of the good and crucial parts of what it meant to be an Anguillan, our sense of community? Madam Speaker, in a community as small as Anguilla, a single life or family affected by issues of gun crime and violence affects the entire nation. As the chair of the committee would have already detailed the list of recommendations, Madam Speaker, I will not belabor by going through them all. However, I would like to encourage all members of the community to secure a copy of the report and to read through them in detail. This will detail the process, the input, as well as the feedback and insights which would have taken place over the inquiry process and which would have led and resulted in the recommendations before us. However, Madam Speaker, I would like to highlight 3 recommendations which I personally would like to see pursued with urgency. And thanks to our expert advisors, I won't need to be lengthy because they would have each touched on them and gone into the rationale behind them. The first recommendation, Madam Speaker, would be recommendation 2, which speaks to the development of an appropriate marine base and the acquisition of a fit-for-purpose marine vessel for law enforcement agencies to be able to monitor and police our waters. Madam Speaker, we don't manufacture guns here in Anguilla, and it's a widely known issue that our borders are porous. As Mr. Proctor would have highlighted, even during the COVID pandemic, where millions were invested on a monthly basis to secure our borders, there were still instances of persons coming in. So, Madam Speaker, and I'll dare go on and say, with the UK being constitutionally responsible for external defense, I think that this is one of the opportunities for both the UK government and the Anguilla government where they seriously need to partner and see material impacts, see the vessel and this marine base go from being a theoretical concept in conversation to a material institution before us. We need these resources if we're ever going to make a dent or not revisit the same issue in 10 years discussing the same thing. The second recommendation, Madam Speaker, would be recommendation 6, which speaks to the development of national sports programs which promote inter-community support amongst both youth and adults. Madam Speaker, while Anguilla is divided into 7 geographical districts for political purposes, as well as many individual communities amongst that, we are all one. And I feel that at times, because of the divisive way that we may view persons from other communities, sometimes we tend to forget that. We tend to have this feeling where, oh, if you're from the East, you're from one community, and if you're from the West, you're from another, as if this was French and Dutch St. Martin, Madam Speaker. This is one Anguilla, Madam Speaker. Our entire nation is one village, one community. There should be no reason that any youngster living in West End should have any issue going to the East, or anyone from the Valley should have any issue going anywhere in Anguilla for that matter, Madam Speaker. So the idea of putting in place programs which fosters those relationships within the communities and within the districts across the island, I think would be a useful first step towards reigniting that spirit of we are all one. And finally, Madam Speaker, recommendation 20, which speaks to the implementation of CCTV in strategic points across the island to help with policing efforts. Madam Speaker, we are all but human, and the police are but limited resources. None of us will be up and working and be able to be accountable 24/7. But thankfully, we have technology now, Madam Speaker. In fact, Madam Speaker, the United Kingdom, or UK, our administering power, the capital London, is the city in the world that has the highest density of CCTV cameras per population. So, why can't we take a page out of their book if it's definitely working for them? If they're able to put many cameras per individual person, why can't we invest and work with them to adopt the technologies to implement across key strategic positions what will do the work of 10, 20, 30 officers being out on patrol at a single moment in time? What would have happened if that camera that Mr. Proctor spoke about had not been taken down for another week? Madam Speaker, I think that these three recommendations in particular are not any that are controversial and not any that we don't know what needs to be done, but more so we need to figure out how do we get them done as quickly as possible and put them in place in order to build a safer and a better Anguilla. Madam Speaker, it is also encouraging to note that headway is already being made towards implementing the recommendations of this report. Recommendation 19 states, law enforcers should engage in consultations with relevant stakeholders to strategically revise the criminal code and firearms legislations. Madam Speaker, it is good to note that we have already seen revisions put forth to the firearms legislation, which have already been introduced into this Honorable House for its first reading. The next step in the process is to see this taken to consultation, as in line with the recommendation, Madam Speaker, which I know is the intent of this Honorable House. But I take it a step further, Madam Speaker, and I beg the public to please come out and participate in this consultation process. It is not important to only educate yourself about the proposed amendments that are being put forth, but they have material implications for your potential loss of liberty. To put it for the layman, Madam Speaker, this legislation will look towards putting forth mandatory minimums for those caught with firearms or in firearm-related offenses. This means that gone will be the days where you simply get a slap on the wrist and pay a little fine, or auntie and uncle bring bail, and you walk off. If you're caught with a gun, or if you're caught in a firearm-related incident, you will be serving time. Now, Madam Speaker, not only is it important that those members of civil society come out and voice their opinions and make sure that the legislation is shaped in the best public interest, but we have already heard as well on radio some legal concerns to the legislation where persons within the legal field feel that the amendments in the way they're currently structured may be able to be constitutionally challenged. Madam Speaker, the legislation in its current form is not final, nor is it perfect. But we as members of a committee, and definitely the feedback that went into the process, have shown that we need to have tighter legislation around penalties associated with gun crime and violence as a deterrent, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I say this as someone who has had a family member struck down by gun crime and violence, Madam Speaker. And really and truly, it's about time we stop letting people get away with it or feel that it's okay to walk around wielding power and take someone else's life without consequence. So, Madam Speaker, I hope that that consultative process will be one that's interactive, one that is fruitful, and one in which the public participates. But that legislation being passed, I think, represents the first milestone of this committee, as it will be our first recommendation adopted. And I look forth to having the commitment of not only all members present, but the entire community, to seeing more and more adopted as we lead the path towards a safer community and a safer Anguilla. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to all persons involved in this process for the work that you have done.
Thank you, Honorable Single Island White Electoral District Member, Mr. Joseph Antipo. The member for Valley North is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to speak on this motion this morning. I wish to say good morning to the members of the Honorable House, the members of the general public listening via radio and Facebook Live. Madam Speaker, there is so much unity. There is so much power in unity. I wish to thank the committee for their hard work and the collaboration that has been undertaken over the past few months. When we spoke in the House of Assembly on May 23, 2023, we committed to working collaboratively to come up with solutions to some of the complex challenges that exist on this island as it relates to gun violence. I wish to especially thank the advisory members of our committee, former Commissioner of Police, Mr. Daniel Proctor, known to many in our community as Paro, and Mrs. Bradley, the Community Services Planner, for their work. Your insight has been invaluable, and your dedication to this cause is worth noting to the public. I also want the public to know that the work that has been undertaken by these two advisors has been without compensation. In the last few months, there have been quite a number of meetings and work that has gone into this work. I also want to thank the Clerk of Committees, Mrs. Vanisha Proctor, and her support staff for the outstanding work that they have undertaken through the preparation of this report, helping to conduct meetings, keeping us on task, but also providing us with supplementary research and important information. Your dedication is valued and appreciated. For the members of the public, Madam Speaker, I just want to take this opportunity to explain the process that was undertaken over the last few months. When the committee was first put together, we initially met to establish the terms of reference, and this is essentially an outline of the work that the committee would focus on over the next few months. We also shared and did our own research, quite a bit of research to find statistical data on gun violence and crime in other jurisdictions, some close to home like the Caribbean, but others further afield like the US and the UK. And then, Madam Speaker, we went on to perhaps the most informative portion of our work, and that was in interviewing a wide range of expert witnesses on and off camera. Our witnesses included, but were not limited to, the Commissioner of Police, the Comptroller of Customs, the Attorney General, educators, and even parents of young men who are facing challenges, and also individuals who themselves were victims of gun violence. And we also interviewed other key members of society. And I said that this was perhaps the most informative because this was an opportunity for the committee to come face to face with the persons who are on the front line, whether from a government standpoint or from a community standpoint, who are at the front line facing a lot of these issues related to gun crime and violence. And I think the committee got a better understanding of some of the challenges that they face, some of the resource scarcity challenges that a number of government departments have as they, go out and try to work hard to reduce gun crime and violence. But we also got a sense of the effects of gun crime and violence on family structures, and how years after, Madam Speaker, so many persons are still feeling the pinch of things that happened over a decade ago. Madam Speaker, just recently this year, one of my closest male friends was a victim of gun violence, and as such, Madam Speaker, my godchild no longer has his dad, Madam Speaker. And as someone, Madam Speaker, who grew up without their dad, I know exactly the type of void that causes, Madam Speaker, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. The reality is, Madam Speaker, is that gun crime and violence has so many wide-reaching effects. It affects young children, but it also affects parents, Madam Speaker. Imagine parents burying their young children who have not even realized their full potential. These have massive impacts across our society, Madam Speaker. One of the things that I want us as a people, the general public, the members of the legislature, Madam Speaker, to remember, if we take nothing away, is prevention, Madam Speaker. We have lots of social-based institutions that deal, Madam Speaker, with the issues once they exist. But what we don't have enough of, Madam Speaker, is resources being put into preventative mechanisms, Madam Speaker. I want to take this opportunity, Madam Speaker, to lobby for the Community Services Department, Madam Speaker. Again, because it's a department that will focus primarily on prevention and support services, Madam Speaker. Imagine being able to identify from as early as primary school troubled students who may be causing issues within their classroom settings. Yes, Madam Speaker. Positively profiling young children that may have challenges, and then intervening to provide, whether the child directly or the parent, the support necessary, Madam Speaker, to prevent long-lasting issues. This can only be done, Madam Speaker, if we have the resources being put into an organization, a department that is adequately resourced to be able to, one, look at identifying these students, but also, once identified, come up with specific programs that can be geared towards that particular individual child. Because the reality, Madam Speaker, is a lot of children who are facing struggles at the teen years or at the young 20s. These things were being seen years before, Madam Speaker. You will hear teachers tell you, oh, I knew he was always a troubled child. I could see it from very young, but no one stepped in, Madam Speaker, to assist whether the child or the parent. So prevention, Madam Speaker, is definitely something that we need to look at as a community, as a government, and as a people generally. I encourage the members of our society to take an individual role in this epidemic that we have on this island, because all of us have a responsibility, Madam Speaker. All of us have a role to play in all of this. As I continue, Madam Speaker, as a committee, we then reviewed all of the information that we had collected in collaboration with our expert advisors on the committee. And then we came up with a detailed list of recommendations for various departments and social institutions. And it is our hope, Madam Speaker, that these recommendations will be taken step by step. And the reality is, Madam Speaker, is that the recommendations are not pie-in-the-sky ideas. We were very careful to look at things that, one, some were low-hanging fruit, but others that would have maximum and immediate impact, Madam Speaker. Why? Because we see the value of the institutions, of the programs, of the policies, of the departments that we're recommending. We see the value that they have. Why? Because they're already doing good work. So if properly resourced and staffed, then of course the work that will be undertaken will be even greater, Madam Speaker. I'm happy with the work that has been undertaken thus far by the committee. I think that the recommendations are solid, and as a legislature, Madam Speaker, I think we can work very, very hard as we move forward to ensure that all of the different government departments and the persons involved have the necessary support, whether it's legislative, but also on the government side, have the financial resources as well to be able to implement some of these programs. And I am aware, Madam Speaker, that these things won't happen overnight. I don't think the committee is expecting that. But we want to see a deliberate effort towards implementing a number of these over the next couple of years, Madam Speaker. I will continue to work within my district to encourage community programs and to foster unity among our youth. And I will also continue to commit to leading by example. I want to once again thank the House, the members of the committee, our expert advisors, all of the persons who came to the interviews and poured out their heart honestly, Madam Speaker, and in a very vulnerable state, Madam Speaker, because at the end of the day, especially as parents and victims, it's very difficult to talk about the struggles that we are facing and to be very open and honest in front of people who you don't have personal connections and relationships with, Madam Speaker. I also want to thank you, Madam Speaker, for sanctioning the committee, and also to the Leader of the Opposition for my selection. Thank you once again, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity, and thank you to the committee.
Thank you, Honorable Member for Valley North. The Single Island Wide Electoral District Member, Mr. Kenneth Hodge, is recognized.
Madam Speaker, good morning. Good morning to my honorable colleagues on both sides of the House. Good morning. Madam Speaker, I rise as a member of this House, but primarily as a member of the Select Committee which was set up by this honorable House, Madam Speaker, back in May of this year. And Madam Speaker, as I sat here this morning listening to the presentations, it was rather sobering, Madam Speaker. It really brought no joy, it really brought no real sense of achievement because, Madam Speaker, we were confronted this morning with a stark reality of the effects of gun crime on Anguilla. Madam Speaker, I listened intently to the presentation by our two expert advisors, Mrs. Hyacinth Bradley, Community Services Planner, and Mr. Rudolph Proctor, the former Commissioner of Police, Madam Speaker. And even outside of what they said, the way they said it, Madam Speaker, the passion, Madam Speaker, and I can even sense at times the pain in their voices, Madam Speaker, brought home to us that this is a serious problem, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, as a ministry that has at least two agencies that are directly involved in elements of law enforcement, the Immigration Department, Madam Speaker, we have a task force. And I'm reminded every day when those officers go out, they are putting themselves in harm's way, Madam Speaker. Sometimes in the evening when we are all asleep, they are out, working in tandem with their colleagues in immigration, the Royal Anguilla Police Force and Customs, Madam Speaker, keeping our borders safe. And of course, in our Labor Department, Madam Speaker, where we have officers going out to do site inspections, they are putting themselves in harm's way. So this report, Madam Speaker, is relevant for all of us, Madam Speaker. And I am not going to try to reproduce what would have been said already, but Madam Speaker, permit me for a few minutes perhaps to share with the listening public and the honorable members of this House a few thoughts that I gleaned from a just produced report, Madam Speaker, from the Firearms, the Implementation Agency for Crime and Security Impacts. They just published a report, Madam Speaker, on the 30th of November, a few days ago. And Madam Speaker, that report highlighted that the proliferation of illicit firearms, ammunition, parts, and components has been prevalent across CARICOM and the wider Caribbean in recent years, given the region's porous borders and its strategic location as a key transshipment point, Madam Speaker. And it goes on to say, gun violence in the Caribbean is often associated with intertwined factors of gang violence, drug trafficking, and access to illicit firearms, Madam Speaker. I'm just going to skip through some of the salient points of the report. And then it speaks about analysis of firearms purchasers and data, highlights increasing and deeply concerning tendency for Caribbean-born persons legally residing in the U.S. to purchase firearms which are then shipped to and recovered in the Caribbean, Madam Speaker. And then it talks a warning about the upsurge, Madam Speaker, in the prevalence of ghost guns, Madam Speaker. And for the members of the public, ghost guns are basically where persons bypass and assemble weapons, have no serial numbers, and this is a cause of concern in the region, Madam Speaker. So when we look at this report and all the work that went into it and all the persons that appeared before this committee over these many months, Madam Speaker, it tells us that while we are looking at what's happening locally, we also have to take into consideration, Madam Speaker, that this is part of a wider Caribbean and international problem that we are afflicted with here in Anguilla. And I want to pledge my support as a member of this House and as a member of this administration, Madam Speaker, to continue to support efforts to eradicate gun crime in Anguilla. As an administration, Madam Speaker, we are continuing to discuss ways of providing resources to assist in this endeavor, Madam Speaker. And I just want to close by thanking the members of the committee who I work with, the honorable members from the other side, Honorable Shelia Rogers-Webster, Honorable Joseph Vanderpool, my colleagues, Honorable Merrick, Honorable Deanne Kentish-Rogers, and Madam Speaker, of special note, Madam Speaker, our two expert witnesses in the persons of Mr. Rudolph Proctor and Mr. Cecily Bradley, Madam Speaker. They brought depth and balance and perspective to our deliberations. And also, Madam Speaker, we also must recognize the many persons that came forth and gave presentations to this committee. Some were public, some were not, Madam Speaker. But I think we are moving in the right direction. And as Mrs. Bradley said, now is the time to lift the veil off, Madam Speaker. We have gone so far. Let it not be an exercise in futility, as many times has happened in the past. Let this be a positive step to removing the veil and finally addressing this scourge in Anguilla, finally head on, Madam Speaker. Again, I commend the members of the committee for this excellent report, and I look forward, Madam Speaker, to lending my support to implementation moving forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The member for Valley South is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I, of course, don't intend to lengthen the House's time. I think that the appreciation was shown for members of the committee, persons who would have come as specially invited guests to the committee, Mrs. Bradley and Mr. Proctor, all of the witnesses and the persons who would have come in for interviews. We would, of course, like to repeat our thanks for their cooperation with the work of the committee. And, Madam Speaker, the work of the committee was indeed quite I would say heavy, just because we're dealing with an issue that is very live in our communities today. And therefore, the feeling of responsibility that everyone in that committee felt was palpable. And there is one thing that I did want to share with the wider public of Anguilla in relation to the work in reducing and preventing violence in the Anguillian society. There is a preventative arm to violence prevention. There is a punitive arm, and there's also a rehabilitatory arm, rehabilitation. And as a community, when we talk about what type of society we would like to have, we must be sensitive to the way we respond to appeals for assistance from the Royal Anguilla Police Force, appeals to engage in programs offered under various ministries. And as Mrs. Bradley would have said, of course, part of that appeal relates to ensuring that these programs are as sustainable as possible. But I do want to say that I have heard multiple times where persons in the community may take the perspective that the right solution to the problem of gang violence is to lock everybody up, to take them off the streets, take them out of the faces, and therefore the problem will then be solved. But all of the prevention work that you may come into contact with, what underlines that work is that individuals in a society do not exist in a vacuum. So they exist within the context of relationships, whether that's relationships with families or relationships with friends. They exist in neighborhoods, in communities, within the context of the wider society. And therefore, for prevention to be effective, there must be a level of consistency at all layers. So the message that we hear within the school system has to be the message that we hear at home. And while I do take the perspective of that it is not the government's role to step into the home, usually homes are supposed to be protected under the Human Rights Convention from interference. I do believe that it is important for us to still provide assistance to homes to ensure that the tools and the assistance they need to be able to effectively manage their homes is available. And when Mrs. Bradley spoke to the Family First program, Madam Speaker, I recall when it was launched in 2022, early 2022, we said very early in the launching of that program that this Family First program is not intended to target specifically and only persons who may have particular difficulties with their children. Because the danger in believing or understanding that the context only relates to persons who have particular challenges with their children is that you are divorcing your children from the reality that they exist within a wider context. The society's context, their friends' context. So while you may not have a particular outlook, or you may take a particular position as it relates to how you, as a guardian or as a parent or as a family member, how you engage with children, that child is going to be exposed to different engagements in other settings. And therefore, it's important for us on the round to understand what is the standard that we're trying to reach. What are we trying to accomplish through engaging with parents in this holistic manner? And we're not blind to the fact, Madam Speaker, that there are multiple households in Anguilla wherein children are not raised by their parents. There are multiple households in Anguilla where children are raised still to this day by their grandparents or by another family member. And so the work of Family First and the work of prevention and creating that consistency is about a wider recognition of all members of the Anguillian public that realistically we all need to be engaged in the Family First program, realistically speaking. If we are to say this is going to be a consistent methodology that we are using to address the issues, to be able to have healthy conversations, to understand what healthy conversations are, because again, Madam Speaker, I think it's important for us to empathize with parents to a certain extent. Because many of them, this is their first time in the role of a parent, for many of them. And maybe they may not have had the guidance that some of us have been afforded to have nuclear or expanded families wherein we have that kind of support networks. There are persons within our society who do not have those support networks. And it is incumbent on us as a community to provide that holistic support. So I take this opportunity really, Madam Speaker, to challenge each member of our community, each member of our society, when we are dealing with the issue of crime and youth violence, not simply to sit back in our chairs this morning, this afternoon, listen to the presentations, nod or shake their heads in agreement or disagreement, but I challenge you, I'm asking of you to step forward. Step forward and see how you can be of assistance. Step forward and be trained as a mentor. Be an active part of the solution. And yes, Madam Speaker, you would have heard on multiple occasions, there is a refrain about the need for more men, male mentors within our society. And there is some veracity to that request, Madam Speaker. There is some veracity to that request. And I can't necessarily go into all of the details and the research as to why you do need to have positive male role models in young men's lives. While, as women, we can do our utmost best, there is the need to have positive male role models in their lives. And so, that work of prevention, Madam Speaker, is part of a wider context. And you can see in the report that the report goes between preventative measures, for instance, the programming offerings, to punitive measures, to the stiffer firearms offenses, to rehabilitation methods. There's a wide ambit. And the report on page 1 or 2 states very clearly, the committee acknowledges that this is not a one problem or one shoe fixes all solution. It's not. It's multiple, it's tiered. And I want to ask our community to continue to engage. And I say this, Madam Speaker, because I understand and appreciate that there may be some trepidation or maybe some hesitancy in engaging in these kinds of activities. There are persons who feel, I have my family is fine, I don't need to engage in this, I don't need to introduce any instability into my family structure or my family unit. There are persons who rationally say, I know a standard that I'm setting for my family. I don't need to really engage outwardly with young persons who may not have had the same privileges. But I think it's worth saying, Madam Speaker, that once again, we do not live or exist in a vacuum. And a lot of people say, when you see your neighbor's house on fire, wet yours. We should be wetting all of our houses. We should be doing that all together, Madam Speaker. It's our duty to do so. And in this wider effort, Madam Speaker, to really engage with, personally and professionally, with this issue of violence, I think it's also important that I ask the community to, as far as they can, to support our educators. Our educators and our teachers who very often see things firsthand, may say, okay, I see certain patterns occurring and may flag it, that we engage with it not in a matter of blaming, but to say we identify something that we don't want to continue to see, and therefore we'll engage with it positively. Many times I hear persons say, a teacher might say, I've seen this young man or young woman engage in certain behaviors and activities that I don't think are positive for his or her overall development. And very often you'll hear on the other side persons saying, well, what the teacher know about anything? I know my child. But we all, and there's an extent of protection. Persons are responding from the place of, I will protect my child because nobody protected me. There's a lot of cyclical elements that take place here in these conversations, Madam Speaker. But it's important, if we are to address this substantive issue of violence, that we put down our egos. It's really important for us to put down our egos. And I am heartened to the extent that in relation to a number of the recommendations of the committee, that this administration has already started taking steps to address some of the issues identified. First and foremost, but of course you may hear more at a later date, in relation to CCTV as a critical need for prevention work for the people of Anguilla and the Royal Anguilla Police Force. Secondly, in relation to resources for sports development in Anguilla, to ensure that we have wider opportunities available for young people within the sector of sports development. And we have multiple other elements and things that are being suggested, including, and I know Mrs. Bradley has been appealing for more resources for a long time, but including more resources for the community services planner. And so, Madam Speaker, while I want us to appreciate that while this is a complex issue, part of the solution is actually very simple. And part of the solution means each of us taking individual accountability and authority for our role, the role that we personally play in tackling this issue of youth violence and gang crime. If we say we love Anguilla, this is a part of the work of demonstrating our love. And so I want to thank the committee, and I want to thank the chair of the committee for making this work possible, for sticking with the time frames, to bring this report to the House of Assembly, Madam Speaker, because I do think that it is probably one of the most important pieces of work that this House of Assembly has accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. For Valley South, are there any other contributions? The member for Island Harbor is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I wish to thank the committee, especially the committee chair, this being the initiative of the Honorable Merrick Richardson, member for Road North, Madam Speaker. And it is apparent throughout this report that his hand and his thoughts were in this as it pertained to, he's always been engaged in youth and sports, and certainly seeing this as an avenue to curb the scourge of gun violence. Madam Speaker, I won't be long. As others have spoken well, I want to thank the expert advisors, former Commissioner Rudolph Paro Proctor and Mrs. Bradley for their input, and certainly Their words were well-spoken, passionate, but showed a commitment to seeing that this element that is non-Anguillan, that is foreign to us, where our young people engaged in crime. Madam Speaker, what impressed me here was in the section that talked about the impact of gun crime and gun violence, that there are 29 homicide deaths due to gun crime over the past decade, 10 years. One person lost is too much, Madam Speaker. 29 persons, this is certainly not something that we can ignore. And then to look at the age range from 14 to 71. And Madam Speaker, you know that we responded, I think it was the 27th of December, a couple of years back, when one of our family members was gunned down in his home. And that early morning we congregated because it touched everyone, not just the persons immediately related, but certainly all of Anguilla is touched when there is gun crime. And so the seriousness of this cannot be lost on any one of us. And certainly I know, Madam Speaker, that the governor's office and the governor and the UK is responsible for internal and external security. But we are the ones that will be affected directly when someone dies from gun crime. And not necessarily only dies, but is injured. And we've heard about the cases of persons who were witnesses to the committee that, their lives forever affected and shattered by being injured or having family members die. But the government has not been sitting back, Madam Speaker. I know certainly this is a matter of resources, but this administration has committed to addressing this head-on. And certainly we have to take it that seriously that we commit the resources to it. And I can stand here today and say that that is what we're doing. And the minister, the member for Valley South, hinted at some of the plans that we are putting in place. And we'll hear more about that in the budget presentations and debates coming up later this week and next week. But as was stated, guns are not manufactured in Anguilla. They get in illegally. And that's something that has to be committed to. And we have committed in our budget to more funds to increase the amount of personnel for the Royal Anguilla Police Force, Madam Speaker. We've also committed to more services so that there can be further investigations, analysis. And we have asked through the Governor's Office, United Kingdom, to participate in this by providing UK police and personnel to assist in those areas, Madam Speaker, investigation, analysis, and also with intercepting and, making sure that illegal guns are rooted out and removed. And this will also involve further legislation. I know there's thoughts of a gun amnesty to see if we can get rid of these guns off the streets and from homes and that are illegal weapons that are being used to continue this, Madam Speaker. So border security is important. We have to make sure that we can monitor the borders, can patrol our waters, and this is something that we have discussed and continue to discuss as National Security Council and also with the former and current ministers for the overseas territories, because we feel it's important that there be patrol boats that can monitor, that can intercept to decrease gun crime, human trafficking, and drug trafficking. Closed-circuit TV is in our capital budget for 2024, Madam Speaker. Mental health and psychosocial support is important. We will have a resident psychiatrist in Anguilla. Finally, Madam Speaker, we've been trying for years, it's been in our budget. Finally, we'll have a resident psychiatrist. We have online counseling options, Madam Speaker, for confidentiality. Psychologists and counselors are on island that have been working overtime to help in the Ministry of Health, in the schools, in the churches. We even have pastors and laypersons in the churches that are giving of their time willingly to help in the schools and also in the community, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've seen here in the report, it says, why are young people so frustrated? And it lists here that they feel financially strapped, low salaries, lack of opportunity to learn a trade, prices in local stores are too high, limited opportunities for young people in particular to obtain loans, especially those without collateral. Madam Speaker, we have increased public assistance. The minimum wage is coming into effect on the 1st of January 2024, done by the single island-wide member here, the Minister for Home Affairs. We have committed, Madam Speaker, to building the TVET Center at the Albina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School, the quarter campus. This is a commitment of $17 million, Madam Speaker. Where's that money coming from? We'll hear more of that during the debates coming up next week. Cost of living increase, Madam Speaker, we have given electricity subsidies, cost of living benefit support, price control for gasoline, Madam Speaker, and this will continue, especially for zero-rated items, as we get the price control legislation coming to this House early in 2024, and Consumer Protection Unit will be in place to monitor, Madam Speaker. Because, Madam Speaker, just last week we added on exempt services for GST. There will be also extension of the essential foods and essential items, the basket of goods. But we want to make sure that when this is passed by Executive Council, passed in the House, that the businesses pass on these savings to consumers, Madam Speaker. And certainly that's the reason why we have to make sure that we have price control and we have the, fines and other ways of enforcement. Madam Speaker, the Anguilla Development Board, we have put money in there for loans at low interest rates. So we want to make sure that young people have access so they can develop businesses and fund those businesses. There's the Get Set program, which has been in place for many years, with mentoring and funding. The Anguilla Youth Business Foundation is there to help with mentoring and assisting young people with how to develop their businesses. The Minister mentioned about increased vote for sports, Madam Speaker. And the single island-wide member, Ms. Quincy Gomes Marie, Minister for Sustainability, Innovation, and the Environment, has shown how we're enhancing fishing, agriculture, increasing jobs with the economic growth and the plans for economic development in this country. So, Madam Speaker, government is doing what we can to make sure that young people have access where they can feel that they can survive and thrive in Anguilla. And so I want them to take advantage of these opportunities that are being made available to our young people especially, but to all of Anguilla. Community policing, Madam Speaker, and that's something that we have been advocating, and certainly the new well, he's no longer new, he's been here since May, the new Commissioner of Police, Commissioner Clark, is aware of this and is making efforts to increase community policing, and certainly that was also mentioned in the report as one of the recommendations. Certainly would like to see this in full effect, and as the personnel increase for the Royal Anguilla Police Force, we anticipate that will be the case. And then, Madam Speaker, legislation, which is important. And we do know that before this House, there's the Firearms Act Amendment, the Bail Act Amendment. We want to follow the lead of our Community Resource Officer, Mrs. Bradley. We don't use a big stick. We use love and caring. But we also know that we have to have laws in place and be able to enforce these laws as deterrents, Madam Speaker. And so these will come to the House, and there'll be public consultation this week on those before they have second and third reading. Madam Speaker, I want to thank you for leading in these areas to make sure that this House is kept on the right path. And I know this is the only the second select committee that has been formed in areas of national importance. And just want to commend the House for being able to carry out these functions, certainly modernize the functions of the House, and certainly hope that at some point we can afford those constituency offices so that we have a closer connection with the community, with our constituents and with the people. And also those offices can be a place where maybe the police and other officers can meet the people where they live. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member for Island Harbor. Are there any other contributions? The member for West End is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm one of the few members in the House that is not part of the committee, but I want to really convey my gratitude to the work that they've done. I think it's a terrific initiative on behalf of the member from Road North. The key in all of this, Madam Speaker, is how well on both sides of the House, and with the expert advice or input from someone I've known very well, having played cricket with him over the years. We call him Sarge, but he's also the Chief of Police. But I think most people know him as Sarge. The challenges, Madam Speaker, is that at times you might think it's about youth, but it's more than youth. It's about us as adults, and it's our attitudes to each other. And it is also a bit of history as well. Too often, you hear adults talk about, from different districts, how they were treated by other district members. That's not helping the youth. That's not helping us to grow. It is vitally important that as a people, we recognize that we have to work together. We really have to work together in order to make our island a safer island. I know when I first got into office, we had some challenges in West End where there were people who were being shot in West End. They weren't from West End, but it happened in West End. And there were some youngsters from West End that were being shot at. I worked with the Commissioner of Police at that time, Commissioner Morrison, about how we could get policing in the area. Some of the businesses, they had challenges with being robbed. So, again, as someone who was representative of the community, I had to try to find a way to at least prevent all these from happening. We formed the West End Community Policing Group, where businesses would contribute to have Anguilla Police Force, Royal Anguilla Police Force, patrol the area at night. The challenge was, Madam Speaker, although there wasn't crime in West End, it was believed it was moving further east. So it might fix it in one area, but still had an island problem. And none of us are limited just to one area. So it is vitally important now as we move forward, and we've talked about this for years. This whole idea of being committed together might be new to the House, but in communities we've talked about the challenges that are faced regarding gun violence. I think it hits home when us as adults see that the youngsters don't really care. When we used to have our punch-ups at school, it seemed okay. But when youngsters are prepared to take a gun and shoot, and unfortunately, Madam Speaker, even when we have our youngsters leaving Anguilla for health reasons, the fact that we had to bury a 19-year-old who was in England, and this was from stab wounds, 12-year-olds. So we have to fix it here in Anguilla, but we also have to make sure that our youngsters and our people are aware of the dangers out there. But we can't look to overseas before we fix it here at home. And I think what is happening here is a great initiative to make sure that we take some responsibility to get our act in place. So I want to commend again the whole House, or the members of the committee, but especially the member for Road North, for bringing that initiative to the fore. But what is most important, at the end of the day, we've all got a responsibility, every single one of us. What can we do to prevent this from happening? I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member for West End. Are there any other contributions? Since there are no other contributions, I invite the mover to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, while I'm on my feet again, I just want to thank everyone involved. From you, Madam Speaker, for ensuring that we were able to put this committee together, to all the persons who came in to give witness and to give statements, to members from both sides of the House. I know the names were called earlier before when the motion was laid, but we had equal members from both sides of the House to show that this was a united effort. And to our two expert witnesses, I almost wanted House to be finished right after both of them gave their presentations, because I thought it was so impactful that we should have ended there. And I'm hoping that both of their presentations will be replayed over and over, just so we as a people can get a sense of where we are and what we need to go forward in this country. Madam Speaker, this is my second time I've had the honor of chairing a select committee. And the reason why I thought of that it would have been a good idea of getting this committee going is because the last select committee we did, I saw how the recommendations were able to shape and form what we were able to do. And I know it wasn't often a tool used for this House before for select committees, but it was obvious then how important select committees, how important we, the members of this House, are in shaping not just the legal side of it, but also how we affect things that go on in our community. So, Madam Speaker, once again, I just want to thank everyone involved for the work. This report is an awesome report. It's a really, really awesome report. When I envisioned what we could have gotten from this committee, I had no idea it would have gone so far. So again, I just want to say thanks to everyone. Another thing, Madam Speaker, when I initially brought the thought, I had a thought process that we should have a select committee, it wasn't just so that we can get the views of the honorable members of this House, their suggestions. Because it, as Mr. Proctor said, we've always discussed gun crime, gun violence. It's not something that started last year, the year before. It's been going on for a while. But it became apparent that we are all discussing it in our little corners, where there's high places, low places, or in between. We've all been discussing it in our little corners. But we needed a spotlight to be shown, to shine on this issue, this scourge that is beginning to overtake our country. Tourism is our #1 economy. When tourists come to the island, what do they say is the most impactful thing? What is the #1 thing that they keep returning to the island for? The people. Anguilla is known about the people. And if we keep eliminating the people, there's no Anguilla, there's no future, there's no turf to fight over. So it is important that this issue be nipped in the bud. I think it's already gone too far, as the Honorable Premier said earlier. 29 murders in the last 10 years. That's almost 3 a year. That's 3 per year too much. 3 per year too much. In an island that is 15,000 people, 16 miles long, that is way, way too much. So it's about time we shine the spotlight on this matter and we get it eliminated. We might not eliminate it totally, but at least if we can get it to a bare minimum, we would have made some great accomplishments. And Madam Speaker, it is hoped that this report from this committee, that we as a people, we as a country, we can consider this our first draft. I was about to say blueprint, but a blueprint is usually the final copy. But I would hope that this can be considered our first draft and how we can start to tackle this growing problem. We have 20 recommendations. Other members of the committee can tell you we probably could have come up with 150 recommendations. But as a member said previously, we wanted these recommendations to be not just something we write, but something that is possible, something that's achievable, and I think we've accomplished that. Madam Speaker, to you, while I'm on my feet, I would like to have a moment just to speak to our young men through you, Madam Speaker. Because I want to say to our young men, because these are the ones who I think a lot of these issues are focused on. I want to say to our young men, Madam Speaker, we love you. Anguilla love you. I love you. And I say this because they are ours. You, as I'm speaking to them, Madam Speaker, you are ours. You belong to us. You're somebody's son. You're somebody's grandson. You're somebody's nephew. You're somebody's cousin. You're somebody's friend. You're ours. I don't see you as an East man, or West man, or North man, or South man. I see you as an Anguillan young man. And we can't afford any more longer, Madam Speaker, to be losing our young men. Because when a young man dies in Anguilla, as has been shown recently, East man don't mourn, West man don't mourn, North man don't mourn, South man don't. Anguilla mourns. Anguilla mourns. I've had the displeasure of having to speak to 2 parents recently who lost their sons, Madam Speaker. And it has caused me, as a father, as a parent, as a community person, as an Anguillan, it has caused me pain to hear a mother on the phone bawling, can't even explain to you what has happened. She's just bawling. To visit a mother, and all she can say, what can I do? What do I do? Madam Speaker, it hurts. It hurts. And we as a community, I'm glad we've taken this step. And as what 2 expert advisors have said, this will not be, they hope that it will not be a report that's produced, put on a shelf, everybody tap themselves on the shoulder and say, well done, we did a great report. No, Madam Speaker. I will ensure for the life of this Parliament, for the life of time that I am around, that persons are aware of what's in this report and the recommendations of this report are seen and that we are trying to accomplish all 20 recommendations, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, as a matter of fact, it has been recommended by the committee that this committee lasts the entire length of this Parliament session. So this committee will continue to work. It says final report, but this is not the finality for this committee. This committee will continue to work. We will continue to gather information. We will continue to make suggestions and recommendations, Madam Speaker, because I think it's too important for us as a people. We've had marches for everything. We've had marches for everything, but this is a situation where we should be hitting the streets, Madam Speaker, because this concerns our young men. This concerns our sons,
And
our
women.
grandsons.
Young ladies as well.
And young ladies as well, Madam Speaker. And I know young ladies are involved, Madam Speaker, but I want to specifically speak to our young men, Madam Speaker, because percentage-wise, they're the ones being most affected and the ones most causing the problem, Madam Speaker. And I need to speak to them, Madam Speaker, because too often we treat them as animals, or as Mrs. Bradley said, the bad apples, the rotten ones. But nobody was a rotten apple when we were cheering and clapping them when they were graduating from preschool and when they were on their Christmas concerts at preschool. They weren't rotten apples then. So somewhere along the line, we as a society dropped the ball. Because our babies don't go from being babies to criminals just like that, Madam Speaker. There's a lot of processes in between. And we are the ones dropping the ball. Why are our young children, Madam Speaker, why are our young men wanting to be rappers and drug dealers? Why aren't our young men trying to be the next honorable premier, the next honorable deputy governor, the next chief of police? Why aren't we as a society grooming our young men to be those, to be striving for positive? Why is that not happening, Madam Speaker? Why our young men is more drawn to gangs? Why are they more drawn to wanting to carry a gun? Why is that happening, Madam Speaker? Somewhere along the line, we as a society have dropped the ball, Madam Speaker. We have dropped it. I'm hoping that it's a bouncing ball, that we can catch it before it bursts. I'm hoping that we can catch and hold on to it. And this is one of the reasons for this committee. This report will not go on a shelf, Madam Speaker. I will guarantee anyone listening under my voice today, this will not be a report that goes on somebody's desk, gathers dust, and stays there and everybody claps, oh, we presented a great report. The report is not enough. This is not about black and white. This is not about paper. This is about the lives of our young men, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, that was not in my notes, but I wanted to say that because I felt it needed to be said. And Madam Speaker, this report, it has already been seen by the Governor's office and Her Excellency the Governor. She's pleased with what she has read thus far. She's assured us that a report will be coming from the Governor's office, and since they're the ones charged with national security, they will respond to this report, Madam Speaker. So that is a good first step. Madam Speaker, in a recent cabinet meeting, I sat across from the Honorable Premier, and I said to the Premier, the Honorable Premier, we can't just speak about security. We just can't speak about gun crime and gun violence. We have to put our money where our mouth is. We have to. He assured me there and then it will be done, and as we will hear next week Friday in the budget presentation, where that... This Friday. Thanks for reminding me, I might have missed it. We will hear this Friday in the budget presentation that we are putting our money where our mouth is. Because, Madam Speaker, like I said before, this is not an APM problem. This is not an AUF problem. This is an Anguillan problem. And we need all of Anguilla to fix this, Madam Speaker. Thank you. Madam Speaker, I did say thank you, but before I sit, I just want to encourage everyone to get a copy of the report. I need everybody who's listening to get your hands on a copy of this report. Read the report. It is online, so everyone can get a copy of this report. Read this report. There are 6 members of the report. You can just come to the House of Assembly. Any suggestions, any recommendations you have after reading this report, please send them on to us, because we know this is not the end all. We know it does not finish here, but I just want to encourage everyone to get your hands on a copy of this report, read this report, and get back to us. Now, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Also, Honorable Member for Road North, and for all of your initiatives to get this to the House. Thank all members for their contributions. This motion does not require a vote of the Assembly, and therefore I just wish to register my thanks again to all involved. Thank you to the expert advisors of this committee for your time and commitment, and to all the witnesses that came forward to contribute to this as well. Thank you all.
Motion 3, 2023, for HOA, approval of integrated tariff amendment regulations 2023.
The member for Island Harbor is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move motion number 3-2023-412 HOA, approval of integrated customs tariff amendment regulations 2023. The resolution, be it resolved that this House of Assembly, pursuant to Section 76 of the Customs Act, Revised Statutes of Anguilla, Chapter 169, approves the Integrated Customs Tariff Amendment Regulations 2023 made by Her Excellency the Governor on the 8th day of December 2023.
Madam Speaker, I raise a second.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, brief explanation of the Integrated Customs Tariff Amendment Regulations 2023. Madam Speaker, we have added zero-rated items for GST, some recently passed in this Honorable House. We have items where the customs duties have been removed, and this motion is essentially to format the regulations to fit into the current regulations, Madam Speaker. Also, looking at amendment to the segment entitled Conditional Exemptions in the first schedule, looking at nonprofit organizations, charities, involving how these charities can benefit from customs duty exemptions up to the amount of $5,000 for charities such as the Anguilla Red Cross and other charities. Also want to highlight for persons entering Anguilla, and that is persons who left Anguilla and return in short time. These regulations define the exemptions. Foodstuffs to a value of $270 EC, 200 cigarettes or 50 cigars, 2 pounds or 230 grams of tobacco, 1 liter or 40 ounces of spirits, 1 liter or 40 ounces of wine, 170 milliliters or 6 ounces of perfumed spirits, 340 milliliters or 12 ounces of eau de toilette. That's for the French among us, the member for Road South. And all passengers under the age of 18 are entitled to import free of duty the following items: foodstuffs of value of $150 EC, 170 milliliters or 6 ounces of perfumed spirits, and 340 milliliters or 12 ounces eau de toilette. For the purpose of persons moving back to Anguilla, Madam Speaker, that is returning nationals, and the personal effects. We wanted to make sure that we encourage persons to come back home. And the reasons for that, Madam Speaker, are manifold. We want to recognize that we have Anguillians who live in the diaspora. We want to encourage them to come back home to help Anguilla on its economic recovery and its progress. So they would reintegrate into society, bring the skills that they have learned elsewhere, and help to develop this country. I remember back in 1967, Madam Speaker, at that time, the request went out for Anguillians to return home during the revolution, to whether to be on the defense council or to serve in many capacities to help develop this country. We are making that appeal again to Anguillians everywhere. Anguilla is on the rise, Madam Speaker, and it's time to come back home and to contribute, to come back, to give back. Strengthen community, national identity, enhance growth and development. And so these are the policies of this administration, that we want to see Anguillians come back, Madam Speaker. The single island-wide elected member, Honorable Kenneth Hodge, has asked that we increase this population. And we want to see the population increase, first with Anguillians coming back home, second with our Caribbean brothers and sisters, and then we extend further afield, Madam Speaker. But for those returning nationals, Madam Speaker, the personal effects will be duty-free, and we also allowed to bring in one motor vehicle. And I wanted to read the rules for returning with a motor vehicle, Madam Speaker, and that essentially says that a returning national may import for his private use one used motor vehicle, subject to compliance with all of the following conditions. The returning national arrives accompanied by the vehicle, or the vehicle arrives within 6 months before or after the arrival of the returning resident. The returning national must be the registered owner of the vehicle and must evidence ownership for a minimum of 24 months prior to its importation to Anguilla. A family that qualifies under this section shall only be entitled to one vehicle. Duty and tax shall be payable if the vehicle is sold, exchanged, given away, or applied to unsanctioned use within 5 years of import. These regulations, cited as the Integrated Customs Tariff Amendment Regulations 2023, made by the Governor and Council this 8th day of December 2023, signed by Her Excellency Julia Crouch, OBE, Governor of Anguilla. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Motion 3, 2023, 412 HOA has been moved and seconded. The floor is now open for contributions to this motion. If there are no contributions, I invite the mover to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Certainly appreciate that the recognition that these are good policies, and we look forward to making it easier for our public servants in the Customs Department and other areas who have to give, in cases of conditional exemptions, Department of Youth and Culture, if it's a related cultural events, Ministry of Education, if it's related to education. The conditional exemptions are helping to reduce the paperwork and assist with our persons who are returning home, or who are importing, or who are contributing to society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Motion 3, 2023, 412 HOA has been presented without amendment. Members, the question is that this motion be passed. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. Motion 3, 2023-412 HOA has been passed without amendment and is now a resolution of the Assembly.
Motion 4, 2023-412 HOA, approval of goods and services tax regulations 2023.
The member for Island Harbor is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the motion number 4/2023-412 HOA, approval of goods and services tax amendment regulations 2023 resolution. And be it resolved that this House of Assembly, pursuant to Section 100 of the Goods and Services Tax Act 2021, approves the Goods and Services Tax Amendment Regulations 2023 made by the Minister of Finance on the 8th day of December 2023.
Madam Speaker, I second.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, the Goods and Services Tax Amendment Regulations 2023 is being updated with this amendment to the regulations for recent amendments to the Goods and Service Tax Act, which were approved in this honorable House and assented to. And in this case, Madam Speaker, we want to insert and put in sequential order the amendments that were and the additions to the regulations. We have cane sugar, white sugar, vegetables, which can be seen includes mushrooms, sweet potatoes, yams, etc. These are additions, Madam Speaker. We do know that the cost of living has increased in Anguilla due to supply chain issues, due to the war in Ukraine, due to increased cost of shipping. And certainly this administration has continued to make adjustments to help to decrease the cost of living. And as these decisions are made and the House debates and deliberates and passes these, Madam Speaker, we hope that the businesses will pass on the savings. We know that recently GST was removed from all insurance products, so we'd hope that the premiums would reflect that, Madam Speaker. We do know that we recently removed GST and customs duties from over-the-counter medications and all medications, Madam Speaker, medical supplies and medical equipment, glasses, hearing aids, wheelchairs, canes, walkers. And so again, Madam Speaker, we hope that the businesses in Anguilla would reflect these decisions made because, Madam Speaker, these are reflected as losses to government in revenue. And we have to justify that when we go to Executive Council. And question is asked, what are the financial implications? And we say, well, we have to adjust down the recurrent revenue and the GST returns, the customs duties and returns, we have to adjust them down. And we are asked, well, how do you compensate for that? Because every dollar that you don't collect, you have to give assurance that this is within the parameters of what was approved by the UK and the medium-term economic and fiscal plan and the forward projections. And these can be costly, Madam Speaker, as we'll see coming up later in this month as we bring more requests for removal of customs duties from essential items and from extending the removal of excise tax from gasoline. And these numbers can get up into the millions, like, you know, up to $7 million you're giving up. And you want to see this reflected at the register, Madam Speaker. And it's not always that we can assure, you know, the chair of the Executive Council or the members of the Executive Council that these are being passed on to consumers. We'd like to be able to say that with confidence. We do know that during COVID, that $4.1 million, which was, you know, given up as duty-free concessions, that in some cases that was not passed on to the consumers, and in fact, we found that there were some cases which could be described as gouging, where up to 400% was added on in the profit, Madam Speaker. So we appeal to the businesses and to those who do insurance and to those who do financial services, that they pass on these benefits that government has chosen to make policies to enact, that they do reflect in that. And people may say that I'm against businesses, Madam Speaker, but I'm not. I believe in free market. But I certainly cannot go and sit with you know, an elderly person who says that they go to the grocery store and they're getting taxed on zero-rated items. That is illegal. And I've seen it, Madam Speaker, where they show me the receipt. Certainly I can't, you know, go to, you know, a single mother with 2 children and they say, you know, they go to the store and infant formula. The price has gone up when we know that, you know, since April 27 of 2022, that the customs duties have been removed and there's no GST on those, Madam Speaker. And then they are told at the store that it's because of GST why the price has gone up. Sometimes they go within the same week and the price has changed upward, never downward. In most cases. In some cases, though, Madam Speaker, businesses are reflecting that if they're not paying it in customs duties or in GST, that they are reflecting a lower price, which it should be. Also, businesses must take into account that they pay GST at the port, they can claim it back the following month, Madam Speaker. And so there's no reason why that should be added on. Certainly, we anticipate there's increased expenses, cost of electricity is up, and that will be reflected in the price control legislation that is coming in 2024, Madam Speaker. But I can say that 90% of the persons that I talk to are saying, where is the price control? Why is the cost of food items so high, especially food items that are GST zero rated? The other, what else was here, Madam Speaker? I talked already about prescription medications are exempt from GST already. That was in the passage of the Act in 2021. But over-the-counter medications are now GST exempt, and also customs duties removed from medications, so that we can, our policy is to improve healthcare and make it more affordable. And then art training, so educational institutions that are providing art training, that they are also reflected as exempt from GST, Madam Speaker. That is what the Goods and Service Tax Amendment Regulations 2023 is there to do. And these were signed by the Minister 8th day of December 2023, Dr. Elissa L. Webster, Premier and Minister of Finance. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Motion 4, 2023-412 HOA has been moved and seconded. The floor is open for contribution to this motion. If there are no contributions, I invite the mover to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. I appreciate that this is important, and certainly it is timely, for the people of Anguilla as we continue to make adjustments as we can, given the fiscal constraints that we have or that are imposed upon us. Thank you very much.
Motion 4, 2023-412 HOA has been presented without amendment. Members, the question is that this motion be passed. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those against, say no. The ayes have it. Motion 4, 2023-412 HOA has been passed without amendment and is now a resolution of the Assembly.
Personal explanations, none. Other business, government business. A bill for Pensions Amendment Act 2023, first reading.
The member for Island Harbor is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to beg that a bill shortly entitled, A Bill for Pensions Amendment Act 2023, have its first reading.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled, A Bill for Pensions Amendment Act 2023 be read a first time. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those against, say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a first time.
An act to amend the Pensions Act to provide for the sustainability of the pensions fund by increasing the rate of contributions made by public servants and staff of government agencies to the pension fund.
Bill read a first time.
A bill for allowances, temporary reduction, Act 2023, first reading.
Recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill shortly entitled, A Bill for Allowances, Temporary Reduction, Act 2023, be read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled, A Bill for Allowances, Temporary Reduction, Act 2023 be read a first time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a first time.
An act to provide for the temporary reduction of certain allowances paid out of the consolidated fund.
Bill read a first time.
Private members' bills, none. Private bills, none. Other orders of the day.
The member for Island Harbor is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to commend the Anguilla National Children's Choir for an excellent and outstanding performance last night. Madam Speaker, their performances were beyond ordinary. They certainly made me proud to know that the potential of our young people is great, and Anguilla is in good hands. They certainly made fun of me last night, Madam Speaker, but I appreciated it. You know, I did tell the director, Ms. Lois Hazel, who should be commended for the work that she's done, that I was going to hang up on her, you know. But it was amazing, and certainly very fitting, and just want to commend them and the director for the great work that they're doing, and the musicians was stellar. Also, all the primary schools, Madam Speaker, that had their Christmas concerts I didn't get to all of them. I wished I could, but certainly, I went to the one at Vivian Vanderpool Primary School and was amazed at how persons so young can perform so well above their stature and their voices, and they were, was a great concert to be at, and I heard from other schools that the concerts were amazing. So I want to commend the teachers and the principal and the staff for the great performances and for showing us what talent Anguilla has. Anguilla has talent. On a sadder note, and just want to say condolences to the family, friends, and loved ones of Miss Sarah Agatha Rowan from the Pond Ground. We would have visited her on Friday, Madam Speaker, and it was good to hear her talk about life and Anguilla. I know she had lived in the UK for a long time, but she was so happy to be back home. And, as we sat there and listened to her, I was amazed by the stories and experiences that she could recount. We wanted to do all that we could to help her then, but I think she had made up her mind that she wanted to go home. She was tired. And the next day, I was surprised to hear that she had passed so quickly. But I think that we learned a lot from her last Friday. So just want to say condolences to the loss of a patriot and a stalwart from the Pond Ground, District 1. And on a happier note, the Island Harbor community will have its Christmas tree lighting and gift-giving ceremony on the 16th, which is next Saturday, this Saturday coming, 16 December at 5 p.m. Island Harbor, across from, is it Sunny Time Supermarket, Jack's Place? Yes. So we look forward to having everyone come out. There will be gift giving for children. We do have an age limit member from Road South, as the, but we do look forward to coming out and having a good time and enjoying some good Island Harbor hospitality.
Are we going to have a whole pig this time for Christmas?
I think they're going to be 2 pigs from what I heard, so, but, I don't eat the pig, but I certainly don't, Amen. But it will be a good time to be had by all. And, I know that we'll have much more opportunities to wish persons in Anguilla and in diaspora Merry Christmas, and so I will save that until we get to later on and closer to Christmas. Thank you again for the opportunity, Madam Speaker.
Thank you also. Any other orders of the day? Then we move for adjournment.
Adjournment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this honorable House be adjourned until Friday, the 15th of December, 2023, at 2 p.m.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that this honorable House now stands adjourned until Friday 15th at 2 p.m. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. This honorable House now stands adjourned until December 15th at 2 p.m. Thank you, members. Have a wonderful day.